I think we're getting a breaking point. I think something's going to happen. Right, to Jordy Journals, we're back. We're back at the Brandon Arms on Gosforth High Street. Very kind that they always let us for our becoming regular Saturday shows. I'm sure some other random podcasts would go, ooh, it's the Saturday show with Dom and Jordan and Liam. We're not into all that rubbish. Right, so no, it is Saturday. Hope you're enjoying your weekend on lovely Tyneside. We're going to have a chat. We're going to have two distinct parts to the show, with of course what ads in the middle from proud sponsors of Jordy Journals. And first of all, we're going to have a little chat about all things that have been going on this week, because it has been, although there's not much happening in terms of transfers at the moment. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of things going on, so we're going to discuss a few key issues that we've seen come up this week and go into some depth with that. And then at the end, hang on till after the break, because we have got a bit of more in-depth transfer talk towards the end of this show, where we'll be giving our opinions a little bit more, particularly around Newcastle United's goalkeeper situation. Right, Dom, what's happening with you this week? What's caught your eye on the Newcastle United front this week?
Away from transfers, because we're talking about that afterwards. Well, it's been a fairly quiet week, I guess, if you step away from transfers, but now the rumblings have been looking ahead towards a return of pre-season training. Newcastle return to pre-season training on the 7th of July. That's the non-international players, so players like Tino Livramento, he'll get an extended break. But we're seeing the likes of Lewis Hall back on the grass, Joelinton, which we'll get on to.
Sorry, Dom, how good has he been, man? Can we talk about that after you've done this? Tino Livramento. Oh. How good's Tino Livramento been, man? He's been
I'll be honest,
unbelievable.
I watched two of the under-21s games, and it was a 0-0 draw against Slovenia and a 1-0 defeat of Germany. And the games I haven't watched, I've actually won. So
I've watched them all, and it was grim. I was looking at the first half of the campaign was grim. I was having a look at it thinking, you wouldn't take much there. Then the last few games, Harvey Elliott and Tino Livramento with Elliot Anderson still brings a tear to my eye. But it's praising them. But those three, I've literally looked head and shoulders above absolutely everything. And I'm dead proud of seeing that these kind of performance from Tino Livramento. He looks like virtually the best player in the tournament. You couldn't, if you put the other three defenders together in the back four of England, they're not as good as Tino Livramento. And one of them's just got to buy Leverkusen for 40 million. Got run all over the place by Tino Livramento on March the 16th as well. So I think we've got to have a little word for Tino.
It's
been good.
He's had a great run at left back.
Played right back though,
but he's right back at the minute, and it was the link up he had with Harvey Elliott makes you. I mean, there might be fans out there doing the same. You look at it, you're like, money to spend.
That's the second part of the show.
He's a good player. He's possibly not Eddie Howe good. Like he's not the up and down merchant, but he's a good technical footballer. Lovely left foot. Can beat a man. He hasn't got rapid pace or anything like that, but just a good technical footballer that if money was unlimited, you'd think you would want somebody like that as part of your squad. And he's got a little bit of the unlocking doors factor as well, and it's not one that I'd mentioned on videos previously. I'm big on the unlocking doors thing. Well, I quite like him.
But yeah, the talk this week, looking ahead, return of pre-season training, who's going to be back, who's not. Tino Livramento, one of the ones who won't. Lewis Hall is back on the grass, but by the sounds of it, he's going to be towards the back end of pre-season. He says his aim is the first game of the season to get back and be available for that game, hopefully get some pre-season games under his belt. And when we talk off camera, when a player's speaking about aims and I want to be back for the first game of the season, is he being ambitious, things like that? So we won't see him, I imagine, for another few weeks still. Probably not the Celtic game, but yeah, he's another big player at left back who Newcastle ultimately didn't miss too much, because Tino Livramento came in at left back and spoke about how good he's been. But I think basically first half of the season, I think he was Newcastle's best player, and he's a player who 20 years old, I think we can be really excited about coming back into the side for the new season.
I said that on X this week, that when there was a pictures put up on there, in my opinion, he was the best player Newcastle had, even when form dipped with the team last season. I thought Lewis Hall was the man.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think when you go back to the December time, slight blip around probably the sort of New Year as well. I think February. He was always the man. I think about the Liverpool game away, which was actually his last game, I think, before he underwent surgery. Kept Mohamed Salah quiet, albeit he did get an assist that day. But
he was outstanding for an hour.
But I think it was in the space of about 3 weeks he came up against probably the most informed players in the Premier League, where we mentioned Anthony Elanga and that, Mohamed Salah. I think it was an Arsenal game in there as well, obviously, with the semi-finals with Bukayo was injured, but Martinelli, Trossard, etc. So he was the most consistent performer. But he obviously took the decision to have that surgery. Hopefully it pays off in the long term. I think we all feared the worst when he underwent surgery, because we had a Carabao Cup final coming up for the player himself. England international duty, Thomas Tuchel's first squad.
England's best left back.
Yeah.
It isn't even close.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get this Miles Skelly argument. I just don't see it. I've never seen it. I've watched him numerous times now, and I'm not saying there isn't a good footballer there. The lad's got a bit of bite about him. I quite like that as well. I like that he's on the edge and winding people up, and I think you need a little bit of that. You need somebody like that in your team sometimes, and he keeps things honest. I like that, but I'm not. He couldn't lace Lewis Hall's boots at left back. Might midfield, but he's not a left back.
There's comparisons you can make, though, both probably more natural midfielders who've then, out of circumstance, moved into that left back.
He's going to have to learn the position, I think, isn't he?
He's probably a year behind Lewis Hall, you have to think, as well.
Few, isn't he? He's a bit younger, isn't he?
Yeah, but in terms of his development and things like that. But yeah, good player coming back, Lewis Hall, and then Joelinton, positive signs from him, Jordan.
Yeah, back at his old club, where it all started. Sorry, I was knocked you there when I was folding my arms. Joelinton. Just giving me the Joelinton elbow. But yeah, he was back at his former club this week. Quite a vigorous process he was going through.
If you didn't know the context, you'd think he was having his medical.
I mean, it was all the testing, wasn't it? Like
shuttle runs, and then I don't
know what that machine is, but it's obviously testing.
The knee machine, but it looked really sore.
It's obviously like testing the strength both ways, isn't it? Like the resistance. But you don't often see that. Like not at another football club. I thought he'd be doing all that kind of thing when he comes back to Newcastle on the first day. Strange. But it must have been signed off.
Yeah,
it must have been.
He's been. I think he's been in Brazil a lot since his injury.
God, mate, he's been there 3 months.
I think he didn't come back for the final game of the season for the lap of honour at the end and stuff. He's been there for a long time with his.
Was he not there?
No, he wasn't there after the game against Everton. No. Spent time with his missus, by looks on his Instagram, and his kids went over, so he's been there for a long time.
He's had a canny summer.
He has. But I suppose a positive is that he is starting to look ahead to being back for pre-season, and by looks it looks like he will be ready on the first day of the season, based on what we've seen on Instagram of Joelinton being put through a strenuous regime. I can't speak today.
Who's he play for?
He's a new sign.
Not yet. Second half of the show.
Yeah, sorry.
It's been quite good watching all the players. And I quite enjoy the people watching on Instagram and stuff, seeing like little bits and bobs. There will be Sandro Tonali's wedding very, very soon.
July 1st.
That's what you said in the YouTube, didn't you?
Yeah, which is 6 days before Newcastle return.
It is. It feels late.
That's what I thought.
They normally get their weddings out the way early, don't they? But he was
Jacob Murphy did.
He was international break, wasn't he? So
I see. He might get an extra week, possibly.
Tonali won't be in straight away, I'd imagine.
No, he'll be off a bit longer. There'll be a few like that.
Be interesting, like Isak, someone like that who was called up but then didn't play pulled out the squad due to injury. Does he come back the first day? Because his fitness is obviously going to be a big talking point, as well as his.
We need to find out what the hell's wrong with Lewis Miley.
I know, yeah.
No confirmation. No.
Pulled out with a mystery injury in England under 19s. Start of the month.
I think I said it was minor, but you never know these things, do you, really?
Minor's enough to keep him out for the full tournament.
Yeah, there's been plenty of minor injuries that Eddie Howe has revealed, and it's ended up being 3 months. So Sven Botman, minor knee injury.
His poker game's been worked out now, Eddie Howe, hasn't it?
So yeah, we'll wait.
No, it's good. I quite like watching all. You see, like I see loads of Bruno and he's karaoke singing away. He's a daft lad. Joelinton seems to have had an amazing summer, and Tonali with his misses and all sorts. Obviously, you've seen Dan Burns suddenly Mr. Everywhere, and he's suddenly become a social media character.
But you talk about internationals. I'd be surprised if he wasn't back when the non-international players are back. Cause I think we've seen it with Kieran Trippier a couple of years ago, where I think he's sort of that leader type figure. I'd be surprised if Dan Burn wasn't back first day of pre-season. But of course, if he wants to take an extra week or so off, then he's fully earned it after he's had.
Yeah.
But you're right, he is everywhere. Podcasts, stages, Sam Fender.
Yeah, because that was the other thing. He did his high performance podcast this week. I didn't feel like I learned much from it, but it was a nice hour.
Well, it goes to Jordan's point. He's done so many interviews and you've spoke to him a few times as well yourself. You have heard it before, but it was some interesting stuff. The stuff about his mental health and his struggles, and that I think is quite illuminating. But he's in the media a lot.
No, I don't know. It's a funny one, that. There is a lot more people open and willing to talk about that kind of thing. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not sure I could be a person who would sit on a podcast like that and talk about intimate detail about, problems you've had. I watched the Callum Wilson one before that. I know I knew of High Performance and people rave about it, but I'd never actually really watched it. I think I'd seen the Eddie Howe one when he did it. That
was good.
But then Wilson just popped up. I thought I'll watch that, and then it was like literally a week before Dan Burn did his.
I think you probably go to them podcasts ready to say something though, don't you? Because the High Performance podcast essentially delves deeper into a sports person and who they are.
Yeah. I talk as if I could be asked on a High Performance podcast. It could be mediocre, the Mediocre Performance podcast.
That's our Saturday show.
Yeah, this is the mediocre. You are now with the Mediocre Performance podcast. Take these supplements to be mediocre like me, right?
But Dan Burn, just on that subject, Newcastle Player of the Season. It's the first time it's actually been fan voted the Newcastle Player of the Season. It's usually decided internally. Deserved winner, you think?
Nah. No, I'm not having it. Honestly, Dan Burn, incredible. I'm not having it. There is literally a centre forward in that team who established himself as one of the best on the planet. He will go down as one of the best strikers this football club's ever had, and you can't give him. He scores nearly 30 goals, and you can't give him Player of the Season on Jordy and nostalgia and one goal in a final. A player is of a season, not of a game. I didn't even think Dan Burn was the best player in the Carabao Cup final. There's your controversial opinion.
Okay.
Joelinton was unbelievable.
No, that's not a controversial opinion.
What I would say...
No, but that's what I'm saying. I think it's the sentiment that always seems to...
No, so we talk about consistency. And Dan Burn, over the 38 games, whatever, cup
was
games,
never the best player.
was always the 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 man.
Yeah, you're talking
7
about...
out of 10 man.
It depends. I think that's harsh.
He's a 7.5 man all season.
Right, that's fine.
Yeah.
But not every player did that.
Don't take this as a criticism of Dan Burn, by the way. I
I
cannot understand how anybody couldn't vote for Alexander Isak.
It depends how you define player of the season. Do you define on 30 goals, or do you
for me, I do.
So do you define it on a most consistent? And for me, I pick most consistent. If you're picking most consistent, Dan Burn.
So the only thing I would again go, which I think goes against the Dan Burn argument, again, it doesn't matter what you picked. It's just a bit of fun. It's just a bit of fun.
We're getting a bit irate.
Got you.
No, but I just can't understand how you kind of literally Alexander Isak has announced himself to the world and was the best striker in the Premier League last season, but he wasn't Newcastle's best player. Doesn't make sense. Where was I going? Right. So even with Dan Burn started every single game at the start of the season, right? And he still wasn't even Newcastle's best defender. So how would you give that bloke Player of the Season? If Lewis Hall had played the full season, he would have wiped the floor with Dan Burn.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Well, no, but I'm saying he only missed 11 games.
Yeah.
And when Lewis Hall was in Newcastle's back four, Dan Burn wasn't Newcastle's best defender. So how can he be Player of the Season? It's sentiment. That's what it is. You're smiling because you know I've got an argument here.
You talk about consistency and judging it on the full season, and Dan Burn fits that bill. Alexander Isak, the first 2 months and the last 2 months of the season.
Body of work over a full season. Alexander Isak is a body of work over the full season, scored nearly 30 goals. If I'm going to pick out individual bits and bobs, then yeah, you probably would.
I think Alexander Isak bookended his season with inconsistency and actually poor performances. Whereas Dan Burn, I don't think barring the odd games where Newcastle as a whole were terrible, really dropped his levels. Alexander Isak's levels dropped through mitigating circumstances. He was injured towards the back end of the season. Dropped his levels in games where Newcastle as a team played very well.
Yeah,
Dan
right.
Burn, as Jordan says, was the consistent 7-8 out of 10 almost every week, and then had the moments as well where he's popping up. Carabao Cup final, as Alexander Isak did too, and I don't disagree. I think Alexander Isak probably would have got my vote, but to say Dan Burn, like almost write him off, I think it's a very close race. And I think Sandro Tonali's in that conversation too. And again, probably the one thing working against Sandro Tonali is it took 3 months into the season for him to actually start games.
So I put Tonali in the same bracket as Lewis Hall because of that missed period, the chunk of games that you can't really. Tonali wasn't great or in at the start of the season for periods, so you probably couldn't give it to him. Dan Burn was. One thing I would say about Dan Burn that's certain is, I think, in a tough pool where there isn't much between the players, I think he's more than established himself. As he's now become, rather than the one that most people look at and say you would replace in the centre halves, he's become the one that I think even if they sign 2 centre halves plays. I think he's got such a leadership. Like the size that he brings, the organisation that he brings, everything that goes with it, the character, the attitude. I think he's possibly made himself near undroppable.
Certainly for the first.
Yeah, the start of the
season.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, the start of the season. You never know how things pan out in a season. But no, I think he's been brilliant, and he's got well established. He's gone well beyond anything I think anybody imagined he could have possibly done at Newcastle United, and fair play to him, credit to him. However, I value nearly 30 goals in a season, and a bloke going from a very, very good striker to literally the envy of the world at Newcastle United. Got to remember, he was also nominated for Premier League awards on the back of that.
The most powerful goal.
But there's got to be a recognition that goals win your matches, and strikers take the flashy awards. And for me, I think Alexander Isak is he's the only player in Newcastle United's team who's irreplaceable. And I think across the course of the season, if you took Dan Burn out or you took Alexander Isak out, they would have missed Alexander Isak a lot more than they missed Dan Burn. That was my recent argument on that might come across as I didn't want Dan. I think it's amazing. Honestly, it's the stuff of Hollywood. It's the type of thing you can make. If they're going to make a film about bloody Mick McCarthy and Saipan, they could be making a film about bloody Dan Burn. That's incredible stuff.
It'll be the next step. Besides all these podcasts, he's been on stages as Sam Fender, Town or whatever. Movie next.
Who plays him?
Liam.
On stilts, I was going to say. You need a pair of platform shoes. Hey God, I don't know. You could play him. Or left footed.
No, I am actually. I'm just not 6'5".
What are you?
I say I'm 6 foot, I'm probably 5'11".
What are you?
6 foot and a bit.
Oh, yeah.
Just over.
6'6" when you had a haircut.
I could play.
Dom will do, and he's left footed as well. I'm just Mr. Average, 5'10". The short man of the group. Only just.
Yeah.
Hey, well, Les Ferdinand's height.
See. You're good in the air. You're best of us three in the air.
Yeah.
By a man.
Not Les Ferdinand, he was incredible.
You got the leap.
Unbelievable. Right, what's that we're done? Maybe 20 minutes or what?
Short video.
Yeah, it's never going to be a short video with us. And it's a Saturday, everyone's sitting down here, maybe sitting around pottering around in the garden on your Saturday or your Sunday, whenever you get to watch this. You might be doing things, you might be in the car, you might be wherever. Let me know how you do take in your Jordy Journals videos, or do you listen to them, do you watch them? It'd be interesting to know how you guys take in our content, because then maybe there might be ways we can tailor it to that experience. And there was a couple of people in the comments asking about that recently, saying, why don't you do it as a podcast? Well, we did try. You tried, didn't you, for a little while?
Yeah, it's on
Spotify, and nobody listened. So, I mean, sorry, a couple of people shouting about, we tried, nobody listened. If you do want to try again, let me know. But you'd have to listen. It takes a little bit of effort, doesn't it, to do all that? We haven't got there's no these big podcasts that you probably listen to elsewhere have big teams behind them where they do all the bits and bobs, and it's literally just us three. And I know we do divide the work up a bit, but there's not much more I don't think we could take on, is there, on top of working the most demanding, I think, your two jobs are arguably the most demanding journalism jobs in the Northeast. I don't think there's two more demanding jobs. Considering national journalists, this is a little bit of insight, might be boring insight, a little bit of insight to say national journalist, any of national journalists, the maximum they would write in a week would be one story a day, and it won't be that. That would be the maximum they would do. Because of the nature of the way that our company in particular makes money from content and things like that. Yes, the ads, we hear people shouting, but the way our company makes content, it's got to be quantity, not just quality, but they also want a bit of quality. So it's got to be, but quantity is the big thing, because that's how they make their money. So these guys are on quotas where they're putting out some days 10 stories a day. There's national journalists might not write that in 6 weeks. Do you know? And that's why, like, so you're actually almost playing two different sports. That's the way I see it. And I think it's really unfair. This is me sticking up for you guys.
Thank you.
I think it's really unfair when you'll get tagged in with other people and criticised, and you're not a proper journalist and whatever. Look, if you were told this is the way you do your job, you do your job, because that's what pays your bills at the end of the month. Yeah. That's how your mortgage is paid. So don't just lay off these guys.
And that's why me and Jordan are writing about Joelinton training at his former club.
Yes, exactly.
Because that's
slow news day, is it?
Yeah.
Well, no, just a normal one in a financial model which makes money over quantity over quality. So it's not our choice. We don't define the nature of the company. We just do the job, and it has its perks. And this is one of them. I hope you do find that. That's a little tangent. That was me tangent for the day, I think.
I appreciate
it.
But
I think it's nice to give people that little bit of context behind what we do and why we do it.
Yeah.
And it gives them an opportunity to explain that.
And then we'll do all the analysis, proper analysis stuff on here.
Yeah, we do. And if you'd like to maybe read some of this stuff, let me know as well. Because that'd be my job.
You've given yourself a
podcasts, long read stuff, like. Let me know.
Do you want me to stick a broom up my backside? Leave that for you, Dom. Right. Right. Don't know what. It's just silliness. Absolute silliness. Right. What we're going to do now is have a little word for our sponsors. I'm gone. And there's loads of details down below. So do check them out. Proud sponsors of the Jordy Journals. And we'll be back on the other side of these ads with a bit more transfer talk, which I'm sure is what you've really been waiting for.
Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. 4 Rivers Financial Planning. 4 Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in.
Right, we're back. That was a proud word from all of our sponsors. You get all of the details. And of course, do remember, like, comment, share, subscribe for all your Jordy Journals content. The floors are lovely and clean and nicely swept here at the Brandlin Arms.
Yes, they've been very accommodating to us this summer, so I just wanted to give them a shout out, become a regular, almost studio for us on a Friday, and people often say or comment, it's so quiet a pub. We're actually very generous at the Brandlin Arms, offering us their function room, which you can hire.
Yeah.
Which just call the Brandlin Arms on 0191 285 4023 or visit the Brandlin Arms Gosforth.co.uk if you're interested in hiring this room and maybe get a bit of Jordy Journals history, where we filmed quite a few videos over the years, or certainly this summer.
Up here, come on.
The corner.
Yeah.
So thank you to the Brandlin. Just wanted to give them a shout out because very accommodating.
They are. Great pub as well. Good food, good drink.
Delicious, yes.
You love the food, you don't live.
I'll be getting the food this lunchtime.
Oh yeah?
I will be, aye.
I might have a look.
No look.
I'll have a look.
We'll have a look. Of course we'll have a look. Right, and what we'll do is we'll have a little look into what's been going on the transfer front. We've kept you hanging on this long.
A long time.
It's been a while. But things are starting to move a little bit.
Yes.
It feels so.
Yeah, it feels that way. News around James Trafford this week starting to ramp up. A story from our colleague at Newcastle, Charlie Bennett.
Yeah, big shout out to Charlie for this one.
Maybe unrelated, probably unrelated.
But we had a big conversation last night, didn't we, about this? It's like literally from Cockermouth.
Yeah.
So the
So-
closest airport, I think.
Yeah, spotted at Newcastle Airport.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it ended up on Twitter, but apparently
Yeah.
not a lot of people recognise James Trafford. I'm sure if he signs in 12 months' time, they will know exactly who he is. But yeah, spotted at Newcastle Airport and
Flew to
flying
Ibiza.
to Ibiza. So, as I say, probably unrelated. Going back to the real stuff.
Yeah.
Just want to get that in there. Give Charlie a plug. Give Newcastle World a
Yeah,
plug.
of course.
Newcastle and Burnley in talks over a fee. Sounds like James Trafford, probably expectedly, has agreed personal terms. Wanted the move last summer. Spoke openly about that on a podcast, the Fozcast it was a couple of weeks back. So yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of movement around here, and let's fingers crossed Newcastle can get that done, a long-term target. So
It's one that you guys mentioned, I think, on it may have been the Keep Sell. Domo said it's the type of deal that, because of the nature around it, because of the amount of noise there's been, it's just the deal that they have to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sounds like they're going to step things up. I think July 1st is an important date as well. You go into that new PSR year and things like that, and that sounds to be the date Newcastle will really ramp up their transfer activity. They want to bring players in for that Celtic game on the 19th of July, ideally before the 7th of July when the players get back. I mean, time constraints they may struggle to do that, but I think James Trafford next week, I'll be expecting a fairly concrete update.
I don't think, unless it's from the other side of things, sorry to be contradictory, from the other side of things, like the other club and PSR accountant, etc. I don't really think, I don't think it's the July the 1st is the hard date that a lot of people, particularly in our comments, have talked about. Given that when you sell a player, you can sell a player on June the 30th, and that whole fee can be accounted for in the previous year's calculations. Whereas if you buy a player, it would literally be one day, and it would go on to the next year's calculations. So buying a player in a PSR world is not the same as selling a player within those calculations. So that's why I've never thought that it was the hard deadline that a lot of people seem to assume that it is.
It's the booster Champions League and things like that.
However,
and Lloyd Kelly money comes in.
Well, what I was going to say is you don't know what you don't know what's happening at the other end, and it might be a case that the other teams want things on the accounts for the next year rather than this year. Yeah. They might be fine this year, and they might think, well, actually, we want to get ahead of the game for next year, so please we'll do July the 1st. You don't know what the financial situations are. We're never ever going to know the full extent of it all, really, until January, when they give a pitted history of what's gone on 18 months previous. You don't really get the full story, do you?
It's not up to date.
No, and it's a long way behind, just the way things work in the accountancy world. But yeah, I'm not seeing it as the hard date. There hasn't really been any major suggestion Newcastle United, apart from Eddie Howe a while back, where I always felt like he was teed up to it, rather than it was a big thing. You guys were in this press conference, but I thought he was really teed up to talk about taking advantage of other teams on the June the 30th.
He was. Yeah.
It never felt, I said this to you immediately after, it never felt to me like he drove those words or those comments.
I think
it was like he was teed up with 4 or 5 questions all around the same thing, and it was all those quotes put together to make one argument, which is fine. That's kind of what people do.
It was 3 or 4 words in an explanation where he's pretty much saying we are not in PSR trouble.
Yeah.
And it's good to be that way, and other clubs are.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be in the hunter position rather than being hunted.
Yeah. And they can take advantage, but it wasn't. I never seen it as what I watched the interviews. I never seen it as him saying we will and we're determined to. So don't be disappointed if there isn't anybody who comes in on June the 30th. But what he was expressing, again, the way I said the nature of this account thing works, if they bought somebody right at the end of this window, be ready to take advantage of somebody else's failings, that's where they are. They're not saying we have to have players, we have to be going. They'll do it if they need to do it. There's been some suggestions Burnley aren't in a great place, who knows. There could be a lot of posturing going on. We did a video not long after there was all this talk of Trafford won't be coming, Newcastle would walk away. Newcastle aren't walking away from that. Unless something happens which forces them to, but the way that the club is, they're not walking away from that deal.
So I spoke to someone at Burnley this week, and piece going out today actually on this video, that £40 million sort of being the fee muted, but they wouldn't be surprised if a deal with James Trafford was agreed around £35 million with add-ons, or potentially even £30 million add-ons. I think the add-ons is really key to that £40 million that's being rumoured.
I think the total sum might be 35.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be add-ons. I don't know. Who knows? Newcastle might not want to pay that. I think
it's expensive for a goalkeeper.
It is, but not if he stays 10 years. And you're not going to sign a player thinking he's a stopgap, are you? I think at that age, they're signing a player who they think's the future. And I think it would be really smart business. You see the best goalkeepers are, Alisson taking for 60 million quid, Edison, these kind of things. These football clubs get 5, 6, 7, 8 years out of these players, and they're more than make that money.
They're already established at the top level, is all that's it.
Yeah. I think there's
a degree of gamble to James Trafford. You trust Newcastle have done the research, and certainly last season, the few times I saw him, Championship level, he's way beyond that by the looks of it, but still an unknown quantity as such in the Premier League.
Really, really well thought of by the people in and around Newcastle United Football Club, the coaches, the manager. They see him as the absolute answer. This isn't like somebody who come in. Initially, the plan was he'll come in and compete with Nick Pope, which I actually still think will happen, unless. You don't know it depends how much they have to pay and if they sign somebody else, and there might be a point where somebody comes in and gives you, puts money on the table for Pope and it makes sense. And it might be that Pope sees the writings on the wall. You don't know how these things pan out over the course of a summer, but the plan really is to keep both players around. And it wouldn't be the biggest surprise to me. Like I wrote in a Newcastle World piece, how long ago now, Jordan? It was at least a month ago.
A month ago, yeah.
First person to say Nick Pope will probably stay. That is the plan at Newcastle United, for Nick Pope to compete. Is to Trafford to come in and compete with Nick Pope. We did a video on it, I think we talked about it.
Yeah, you mentioned it.
That is the plan. I don't really see that changing unless something drastically happens. It might be the case that come the end of August, Nick Pope sees the writings on the wall.
He's into the last year of his contract as of
and it might be the case he gets a move elsewhere and knows he's going to play, and it makes sense. You just don't know. You don't know how these things pan out. You can never it's never a straight line, a transfer window.
Well, that's why Eddie Howe comes out and says, well, I can't guarantee Alexander Isak will be a Newcastle player come the start of the season, because you just never know what's going to happen, and people, that gets alarm bells ringing, but he's just said it'll be foolish to come out and say.
How could you ever? I mean, it could be any player. That's not really dwell on Isak maybe, but it could be any player. You could be absolutely certain, sitting here now going, I'm building my team, my squad, I'm never getting rid of he's the key man, or he's one of the key men, and I build the team around him. And then he might knock on your door the next day and say, do you know what, I want to go. I'm not happy here, and I don't really want to play. I want to go somewhere else. I mean, that's not suggesting anybody's in that mindset or that's going to happen.
There's loads of moving parts.
It's a possibility. And that's taking the two drastic ends of an argument just to say what you're saying. So many moving parts, anything can happen. Nobody can really guarantee what another person's thinking. Only them themselves and know really what's going on. That'd be any suggestion he's unhappy, by the way. Did really well. I mean, we should probably have done this video on Alexander Isak. The amount of Liverpool fans who bumped up our numbers from the weekend, I think.
Yeah.
But Trafford, go back to Trafford. I think he's very much seen as the answer long term, and that's why I don't see them walking away from this deal. Which is why I thought a lot of that stuff from some of the nationals a few weeks ago was all largely posturing, club mouthpiece posturing. That's the way I saw it, because we know what they really think and what happened last year, and how disappointed they were that they couldn't do that deal last year. Not only the player, but the football club massively, and the manager. I don't think they walk away from that deal. I think that's possibly the only, touch wood, again I can't say it's certainty, but it's as close to a certainty of the deals that they're looking at this summer. And like I say, I've never heard anything to contradict the fact that Joao Pedro isn't heading in the right direction. There's been a lot of people bid, no bid, bid in, bid rejected. There'll be a lot of conflicting noises, but I've never heard anything to suggest that they don't think they can get that Joao Pedro deal done at some point.
I think with Brighton, that they're a willing seller as well.
It's a difference.
I don't. They might want to keep him, but I think they're very much open to selling them based on probably what happened at the back end of last season when he had that reported training ground bust up with Jean-Paul Van Hecke. That's how you say his name. Sounds very posh, that one. But yeah,
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That's one. But yeah, no, that's a difference, I think, with maybe essentially Elanga, where you want to sign on for Elanga, you've got Nottingham Forest there, like, no, we absolutely do not want to sell. You're talking figures around £60 million. That could be what happens with Pedro, but at least with Brighton, you've got a club there that are actually open to doing the deal.
It's a really important point you make here. So that's the difference between those two situations, is that at Brighton you've got a footballer that they will allow to leave, but you've got to pay the money. So you've got to get a deal. But if you put the money down on the table, he can be your player. Whereas with Nottingham Forest, I don't think they're of a mind to let Anthony Elanga go.
No.
And as we know, if Newcastle United really don't want to let Alexander Isak go unless he kicks up a fuss, it ain't going to happen. And that's kind of it. You can't literally kidnap players out of football clubs. They do still have contracts and are within reason held to account on that. So that's the difference for me with Elanga, which I would argue out of the two, I think Elanga is a potentially more transformative player to the starting 11 than Joao Pedro is, unless you change things around or alter certain other players' positions, which is possible as well, by the way. But I actually think in terms of squad building, Pedro brings you so much more than Elanga would, because of that. There's just a void that's existed in Newcastle United's front line beyond Alexander Isak. It's like having it's like putting the best wallpaper on the world on top of a wall with no wall behind it. It's like literally papering over a window. Yeah. There's nothing behind it.
Not a crack, a window.
An open window. I mean, that's one of the worst analogies I can ever come up with, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, fair enough.
You put your hand through it.
No, you get
Best wallpaper ever though.
It's good.
100 quid a roll. I have no idea. I don't know.
From IKEA.
It is, yeah. IKEA's best.
Don't even know if they sell them,
Bet they do.
Aye.
You seem like you have wallpaper. You're a handy man.
I'm not.
Yeah, oh man.
You're painting, are you?
I like painting.
You've got a good eye for painting.
I'm going to do some painting this afternoon, actually.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I'm going to paint a mirror.
Good.
Not over the mirror.
No, no.
I'm not painting over the mirror now.
You need to take a call.
It's my mum keep ringing us. She'll not watch this, but stop it, man. I'm doing a video. Right. Any further transfer conversations that we need to talk about? Where we think things are at?
Yeah, I think we should start seeing progress over the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned there,
that's a broad one.
A broad one.
I think we'll see something quite soon.
I think next week we'll get a concrete update on the situation, and we'll be getting tightening fingers hot.
There's a lot of posturing, a lot of leaking going on at the minute.
I don't like giving time scales, because you tend to get held to it.
No, we can't. You can hold me to it. I think we're getting a breaking point. I think something's going to happen. And then the day, hold me to that if you want, but it ain't me doing the deal, so I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. But it does feel that way, listening and talking and hearing what people are saying in and around things. It sounds. I think we're getting to a breaking point. I think you're fair in saying next few weeks will be crucial. I think if they haven't got two in the next few weeks, I think that's a disappointment.
Yeah.
Given the position the club put themselves in.
I think they're more than capable of doing that. It's just they're going to have to be more agile than they've ever been before, and they're going to have to start. It's the squad building game. They're going to have to start nudging players around and getting ones out the door in order to do bits and bobs. They were never ever the drew up the shortlist start of summer of the top targets, and we put all four of those top targets together. It was going to cost you. It was going to cost you up towards 200 million quid to sign them. And you were never going to be able to spend that, so they're not daft. They know they need to start fiddling around.
I think that we're probably going to see them paying premium fees on players that aren't worth what they are, but they ultimately want them and will pay it. I mean, at that point, Elanga, I'm not saying Elanga's going to join, but there was a lot of talk about it. The £45 million rejected bid in midweek. I don't think Anthony Elanga's worth 45 million, but to Nottingham Forest he's worth so much more.
That's why it's a hard deal to do.
Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it. Like, to Newcastle United, Alexander Isak is priceless. To other clubs, he probably has a standard value where it's like probably 100 million mark. But to Newcastle United, priceless. You can't then go, well, Anthony Elanga's probably only worth 45 million, so give him to us. He's only worth what Nottingham Forest feel he's worth, really. Yeah. If they go, he is invaluable to us, he's a £100 million player. We might not. We will disagree, but to Forest he is. So
you've got to say, well, exactly, great point. One thing I think about when you're talking about Isak, we're going to go too much into what we're talking about it, is they're going to offer him a new deal this summer. They had a little nibble last year and got nowhere. They're definitely going to have more than a nibble this year, if not they're already doing it. How strong is his position in this? You've got a football. Imagine you're him. You've got a football club. You've got an organisation that really has sent a message to everybody. World football. We will not let this man go. We rate him so highly, and we even rate him at a fee that nobody's ever paid for a striker in world football. We rate him as the most expensive striker the world's ever seen, and he's only on 100 odd grand. I mean, if you're in that, that's not. If you're his agent, that's not a hard deal to start negotiate. You're literally going to say like, never mind this, double my money.
Yeah, there's bench
if that's me, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You've told the world how much you value me, so now show us.
Yeah.
Give us the money.
Put your money where your mouth is.
That would be where he's in an incredibly strong position. And I hope Newcastle United do look like only give him within reason, but I think they're going to have to. If you want to keep a player who's the only one at the moment at that level, like literally in the conversation about being the best in class in the world in his position, and you have to give him best in class money. If you don't give him best in class money, who could argue he walks away?
Yeah,
goes back to PSO.
And the precedent it sets for the other players.
Well, that's the knock-on effect, but it has to be. And then again, in some ways, there'll have to be open conversations. Like, I mean, the first thing I would do if I was in those meetings would say, "Are you the best in class in your position in the world?" And some of them might say yes. You know, well, there's a door, son.
Also strikers.
You're deluded. You're great and we love you, but you ain't the best in class in the world.
And strikers, naturally, you pay them more because they score 27 goals a season.
Tonali is the one that could argue, I think, of all the rest of them that say that he's in that conversation, or he's getting towards that conversation. But again, the one argument I've said on videos before, probably 12 months ago, was I never classed Isak as world class back then, and the reason being is I think you have to have a body of work. I think you have to be consistent. He's done that at that level now for 2.5 years, where when he's fit, scores goals at a really good rate.
Yeah.
Tonali at Newcastle, I kind of judge his AC Milan stuff. I'm not one of these European football geeks who's watched every other league going and pretends to know everything about every player. I didn't watch Sandro Tonali AC Milan until I found out he was signing for Newcastle. I don't think I'm ashamed in saying that, and I think most people would be good to admit that that's their position as well. I might be a football journalist. I love football. I love watching football, but I don't know every player.
Your time's taken up with Newcastle quite a bit, isn't it?
Of course
Every Saturday, Sunday.
And I love that. I prefer that.
I don't know. I fell in love watching Sandro Tonali for AC Milan, much like Eddie
YouTube.
On YouTube. A 5-minute YouTube clip was incredible.
I did as well. There's a few like that. At least they're not signing them that way, like Dennis Wise. Or are they? No, they're not. That's not right. Right. I think that's probably about it for us, isn't it? I don't think there's much to add.
No. Oh, one thing just on Isak, just before you went on Tonali, one thing I'd like to see Isak do next season is make an impact in the Champions League, because I don't think he did that the first time. To be in an elite top level striker, I think you need to be really denting the Champions League.
So unusual, he's never done that at any level outside club football. He's never. I mean, Sweden don't always qualify for things, but he's never dragged his team into a tournament or anything like that. He's young. That's the thing. He's still young. It might be the case that in 5 years' time you're talking about that.
Just look at someone like I personally think Isak's a better player, but his compatriot Victor Gyökeres, he dented the Champions League and has done the past couple of seasons. Isak 1 goal against PSG. I want him this coming season. He's going to have 8 games, barring injury, in the Champions League. Get yourself 5 goals.
I think Newcastle will have 10. I would, if I was to guess what next season, they'll have 10 games in the Champions League next year. I think they'll get through. I think they'll get in the 8 to 20.
9 to 24.
9 to 24. I think they'll get in that, and I think they'll get. I would guess.
Does this have a dumb simulator last week?
No, but actually, do you know what?
We were fancying them every time.
So I'll tell you what my base position was. I think you need to get 10 to 11 points to get out of that bottom 8 in the Champions League, which means you have to win 3. Newcastle's. I'm just going off my knowledge of Newcastle. Away from home, less good. Haven't really beaten anybody apart from Feyenoord and Leverkusen in that one season. Away from home, struggled in the whole course since the 60s. Away from home. So you're possibly looking at saying you have to win 3 of your 4 home games just to get out the bottom 8. I'm not expecting huge things from the Champions League, but if they can get into that next bit, that would represent good progress. I think it's just get through, and that's 10 games in the Champions League, and I think Isak will make a dent in those 10 games. I think it would surprise me if he's not getting a goal every other game in the Champions League. I think he's at 5 or 6 goals next season. Great, love to see it, unless he picks up an injury, of course. Touch wood, he doesn't.
Good stuff.
What do you think they'll do in the Champions League next season?
I think they'll qualify for the last 32. I think they'll finish in that bottom bracket, and then depends how you get in that stage.
The way it works is, I don't know if you know this, I looked into it and I think I got it right. So the team that finishes 9th plays the team who finishes
seeded, yeah.
Oh, so that way.
Aye, so like if you finish towards the bottom end of your,
you get
one of the best ones. Yeah. So I think Newcastle will probably finish in the bottom half of the full 32.
Yeah.
Was it 30? Whatever. How many teams?
24. There's 36 total.
36. I think Newcastle will probably finish in the bottom half. Not like top end of the bottom half in that
they'll
group.
play
A similar-ish team, but a probably better one.
I think it all depends on the draw. Last time they got shafted with the draw a little bit. This time we've looked at the type of teams you could get. I think if you get a favourable draw, you get a couple of almost gimme home games or gimme away games ideally. Not that many are in the Champions League, but you're looking, there's your 4 wins you probably need to finish in that.
Do you think, could we make a video on the simulator thing? Is it possible?
It's just pure.
Would it be a bit of fun? Like, would people quite like that?
I could do it now and speculate, but it's just like
we could do a bit of.
Who we're gonna get? Well, we did our dream Champions League draw when you were on the beach.
Yes, I was on the beach. Yeah, where was I? Mallorca. It was great. I
didn't pick the group of death. Like, did you?
I came close. I think I said Real Madrid and AC Milan.
I think it was a very different climate at that time.
Yes.
It was like literally we're here to make up the numbers. Let's have fun. And I want to play. We'd never done it for so long. It was like, let's play the biggest games possible. This time round, I think there's a lessening of that feeling. People more, we're not just here to take part.
Yeah.
We are still making the numbers up largely because they're not going to win it. But can Newcastle go as far as possible?
Yeah, get through and make hay almost.
They've only ever made the last 6. Well, obviously they've only been in it 4 times, but they made the last 16 once.
They've never made the knockout stages.
No, because it was a group, but it was the last 6. It was the last 16.
Yeah.
Which was the best campaign they've had, and it was great fun. I went to all the home games, season ticket all at the time, absolutely loved it. Great fun. It was the Andy Griffin, and it was a Feyenoord away, and great campaign. So hopefully they can do something. I think they'll make a dent this year, but does that come at the cost of the Premier League? We'll have to wait and find out.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I think we've waffled enough. It's going to be a long video this. Hope you do enjoy it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your lovely weekend. Fingers crossed it's a nice one on Tyneside, much like the last few have been. We will catch up with you guys next week. It may just be next weekend. We'll see how this video goes, and we'll see if there's anything noteworthy to talk about. If there is something happens, you know that the Jordy Journals, at least 2, will get together if we can at some point and do a reaction video or something breaking news potentially, if we have that to talk about. Right, he's been Jordan, he's been Dom. The broomstick's just on the side here.
We'll keep it that in.
Special guest. Anyway, you'll get that if you watch the whole show. Right, good night, good morning, good evening, wherever and however you watch this. This was the Jordy Journals, and all the details you need are down below. Like, comment, share, subscribe for all your Jordy Journals content.